Okay, here we are. So thank you for everyone who's already tuning in. I'll do some quick introductions. My name is Boris from Aligned. On Wednesdays, not every Wednesday, but some Wednesdays, do these Aligned guest streams where I invite people to chat about interesting things they're working on within zk or Ethereum and related topics. There's a whole bunch of great conversations that I've gotten to host already on our YouTube. But today we have a very special guest, which is our very own Diego Kingston, our head of research and one of our co-founders at Aligned. And Diego is somebody who I tweeted about this, but it's impossible to sit down with Diego and not learn something new. And it's always very informative and educational. And today, Diego is going to be leading us through the history of zk and the sort of key milestones and fundamentals about this technology, which is very quickly being adopted across many parts of the crypto industry, blockchain technology, of course, what we work on at Aligned. So with that, I think I'll just pass it off to Diego to introduce himself and just get started.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Boris, for having me. I think it's a nice opportunity to have the chance of talking maybe about some fundamentals of zk and its history to get more into context. And this is a field that has seen a lot of research for the last 30, 40 years. It's accelerated over perhaps the last 15 a lot. But even some of the results or tools that we used were invented like long before. As for myself, as you said, yeah, I am one of the co-founders of Aligned, but my background started a bit more weird because I studied chemical engineering, and at some point I shifted a little bit to this area of cryptography, and have been working a bit on LambdaWorks, which is the cryptography library that we were building at Lambda class, okay, and developing different provers and everything. So the good thing is that over the last few years, we got the opportunity to work with many important people in the space, and we could learn a lot from them. I think we have been like really privileged to be able to speak with many of the important people and key players in developing this technology. And we are like super grateful to them.
Diego, because you mentioned your background, I feel like it would be relevant and interesting to hear the story of how you went from chemical engineering to cryptography.
Well, that's kind of inseparable from Fede. I've known Fede for a long time. Um, I did my undergraduate degree in chemical engineering at the University of Buenos Aires. Then I went to my PhD. It was in the area of non-equilibrium thermodynamics, um, which is an area where you mix a lot of things about math, statistical mechanics. I had to work a lot with numerical simulation and all that. And so, and besides, since I was like very little, I liked math a lot. That is to say, at high school, I sucked at math. In fact, people made jokes about how bad I was at math. But then when I got to college, uh, I felt much comfortable because somehow I wasn't expected to believe in uh, things that people thought they were like intuitive. They said like, oh, you solve these problems because of these like natural properties. And in my mind, it was like, there is no such thing as natural. You have to prove things. And so, well, I got into several math courses and everything. And well, Fede one day told me like, okay, you have a good background in math. I think you should be able to understand cryptography. I think this technology is going to be something huge. Uh, why don't you start like learning and working? And so I said like, okay, yeah, sounds fun. In fact, it was like that kind of conversation, and it happened in very few minutes. And then I think we were lucky to be able to work with a lot of people and meet them. I think that, for example, being able to talk with Eli Ben Sasson was something like really great, because just by talking with him a few minutes, uh, you grasp like a lot of things. And I read like some of his earlier posts on Starks and everything, and I was like, wow, this is so cool. That is to say, there was this fight at some point where people were talking about Starks, and I remember reading Ellie's posts and saying like, why the hell are people fighting about this? It's obvious that Starks are better. The thing was, at that point, I was more on Snark camp, so I had this like divided allegiance, because okay, I had to develop faster Snarks, but at the same time, and my heart thought that Starks uh, were more interesting.
So Diego, I I want to ask you if you remember the first cryptographic protocol or primitive that you looked at. Like, what was it that after you spoke with Fede, you thought, okay, let me look into cryptography. Like, do you remember the first thing that kind of got you, or?
No, it was not like let me see. It was like jumping from the boat, saying, "Okay, I trust you." Uh, I always thought that Fede has a great grasp for what technology can be really innovative. He gets like the full picture, and by talking with him like just a few minutes, I realized, okay, if Fede is saying this is going to be fun and this is going to be something big, okay, I trust you. And really, what got me was like, okay, we're going to do something fun. Um, but first, you remember, I had like no cryptographic background, so I had to start from like the basics. So of course, I started with things like RSA, elliptic curve cryptography. At some point, I thought, okay, pairings look like very elegant. Um, then I think I started working a little bit on Grot 16. But at that point, I didn't grasp all the things. At least it took me like several months. Then at some point, I think that the first protocol that really got me was Plonk.
Hmm.
I started seeing, okay, you have this way of like representing the computation, and then you have to do these checks and everything. It looked like something nice. But then I remember going to Tel Aviv for the Starkware sessions in January. Funny thing, it was really cold and rainy in Tel Aviv. And I remember going to Starkware's workshop on Starks 101. And really there, and then by talking with Eli, things started to fall into place. It was like, okay, really, this protocol looks like simple once they explain like a few things. And then, of course, we started like implementing our own version of Starks. Um, and then things became like more natural. And then we started working on other things, and protocols somehow started to look like more natural. You started seeing like some patterns or some strategies. And then you see a lot of papers, but sometimes you can relate the techniques to the techniques of previous constructions. And so it becomes kind of easier. In the end, you have like, of course, groundbreaking things and everything, but you can somehow put everything into the same framework, or most of them. Sometimes you get something that really breaks and brings a new framework.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that was a bit
No, that was great. I have a few things I wanted to say for people watching. Fede, who Diego was talking about in the story, is of course Fede's intern, Fede on Twitter, one of Align's co-founders and the founder of Lambda Class. Just if people are trying to connect the story. But the last thing you said, Diego, about how so I'm not a cryptographer. I have very minimal cryptography experience or background, enough to talk about it, but not enough to explain it, which is why I'm excited to get some insights from you today. But there's something you mentioned that I really liked, which reminds me a bit of my own like scientific background. You said a lot of these basic constructions and core concepts, like there's new papers coming out, but you can sort of get to a lot of the things using the same tools, if you want to call it that. Like there's sort of like core building blocks that get us to where we're going. And then there are maybe some groundbreaking things that change how we look at things completely once in a while. But you started off looking at earlier cryptography, and you were able to get to the latest stuff, sort of building on that. So I think maybe that's a good way to segue into just the history of zk, right? Which of course I guess there's a lot more history around cryptography that we could probably spend hours talking about before talking about zk. But you mentioned snarks and starks, plonk, grot16. These are all terms that we see floating around that I think it would be cool to put them into the context of like, where did these start?
Okay. First, we have to maybe talk a little bit about complexity theory. Sometimes you want to know, for example, you have a problem that you have to solve, a decision problem, and you want to know whether you can solve it like faster, or the amount of work you have to spend. So that gives you like different complexity classes depending on whether you have, for example, efficient algorithms for solving them. Okay, so an easy example would be you have two integers and you want to find which is the biggest integer that divides both. That's the greatest common divisor. And the funny thing is you have a very ancient algorithm that is still used today, which is Euclid's algorithm, which allows you to
Very,
compute
very
that
ancient.
like super fast, because basically you have what is called the polynomial time algorithm for solving it. Okay, so that's something that is really really fast. Now you have like harder problems where you don't have something that can solve the problem really easily. For example, if you have to solve a Sudoku, or solve something like, okay, you have what's called the three coloring graph, or that is, you have a graph and you have to color each node with a different color so that no two nodes connected share the same color. You see that finding a solution is kind of hard. Okay, of course you can always find a solution provided you have like enough time, but the bigger the problem is, the harder it is to find a solution. But if I give you a solution, you can find it like you can check that the solution is valid really fast, because the solution can be checked in polynomial time, and that is, for example, something that we call the class MP. Then you have other complexity classes,
Okay.
and of course people started thinking, okay, which is the fastest way I can solve a problem, or how fast can I verify the solution of something? Okay, so in some cases you start thinking, okay, maybe there is no faster way of checking the solution to something. But it was interesting because at some point people started realizing, for example, that if you allowed the verifier to interact with the prover and provide like some randomness, you could do or you could check the solution much faster. Okay, so there is a branch of mathematics and computer science that is concerned with these things and trying to show whether some of the classes, for example, that are solvable by interactive proofs, okay, are the same as other complexity classes. You have perhaps the most famous problem, which is whether P equals NP. Okay, the problems that are solvable in polynomial time equals the class or not of problems that you can check the solution in polynomial time. That doesn't mean you have a solution in polynomial time, but it means that you can check it in polynomial time. Which of course, I don't know, if P equals NP, then I think in cryptography we would have like a problem, but so far there is no proof of that. But there was this kind of nice result saying, okay, you maybe you can check the correctness of a computation much faster than just doing everything on your own by leveraging interaction. I think that the origin of zk dates back to this groundbreaking paper by Shafi, Goldwasser, Mikhaili, and Rakov. And they proposed this rather magical idea that you could prove something without revealing necessarily the secret. Okay, right now it would be easy to provide an example. For example, I want to show you that I am over 18, but I don't want to provide my birth date. Okay, so that's something that Google has now in their wallet. I can go and using that wallet and everything, I can prove I am over 18 without giving you my information on my birthday. Of course, right now, after seeing all that has happened, it seems like something that we would like and very natural. But at that time, it was kind of a radical idea, and it took like some time before the paper was actually published. I think it was something like really, really good from those researchers that stood by their idea and went through the ordeal of how do you say peer review,
Peer
the
review.
peer review system. Boris, you and me have been in academia, and we know that it's sometimes painful. Sometimes you have a good idea, but reviewers don't like it, and you have to fight for several years. But eventually, after I think like 3 years of like having different like manuscripts and everything, it was published, and now it's a very like important and foundational paper. And it was like crazy that it took like so long
Yeah.
for something that was like really interesting, both in theoretical and in practical terms.
And this paper, this was 1985, right?
86, I think
86.
they started working before. I
Mhm.
think they had this idea back in 80 something, 85, 84. But until it was published, it took like some time.
Mhm.
And the problem was that okay, they show that it's possible to construct this, but the thing is, for what kind of problems or statements, um, because it doesn't look like you could have like a general construction for anything. They had kind of to develop maybe some ad hoc constructions for some problems, but of course, one thing was okay. Can we build something that is more like general purpose, or is this a construction that you have to build for every kind of problem? So that's the origin of zk, where they define then the property of zero knowledge. Of course, then over the years you will have like the development of several notions. This happens a lot with science, that sometimes you get like some notions, but you don't have like the right definitions. You have like some concept or idea, but you cannot like put it in precise terms. You don't have the notation. You don't have like all the structure that makes it easy to understand, and you have to formulate all that.
Hmm.
And then over the next years and decades, we've been polishing a lot of the definitions and security notions and everything that you need to build this. But it's normal, like in mathematics, when they discovered limit, they had like an idea of what limit can be, but
Yeah,
it was not a precise definition.
I see.
It took like several hundred years to build it from Newton to the form we currently know and understand it.
Yeah. I
Um,
have an analogy I like here, which is like I remember looking at a biochemistry sort of like journal or one of those sort of annual reviews of biochemistry that was like 100 years old in the biochemistry department. They had like some old archive, and I remember flipping through this, and this is over 100 years ago, and they're talking about what we know now as amino acids, but they're talking about how they're isolating these and purifying them and the chemical groups, and they have all these very obscure chemical names that nobody would recognize easily right now. But over the past 100 years, we've studied these so much now we represent them with a single letter because we know what the residue is, and it's like those abstractions didn't exist when they were just discovering these basic things. um,
yeah, exactly. So of course they started giving definitions and everything, and they were like refined over the years. But it didn't look like you had like a very efficient construction, maybe for some kind of problems.
so
A
this
few
this
years.
this first zero knowledge proof, it was not a snark or a stark or these other proof types that people might be familiar with, but it was like a first example of like a zero knowledge construction, you'd call it.
Yeah, in some cases you could build, for example, show like some factorization. Then, for example, one example of something like that is kind of a zero knowledge proof is Schnorr signatures, where you, in order to sign, what you are showing is that you know the solution of a discrete log problem, which is your secret key. And the only reason you can sign is because you know it. Uh, and that way, what you are showing is, okay, I know the solution to this discrete log problem, but I am not going to show it to you. But you will be convinced by doing some calculations that I know it, because otherwise I couldn't have created the signature. Um, so that's, for example, one example that appeared later and introduced something that we know as Sigma protocols. The only problem was that Schnorr kind of patented the signatures, and so that prevented like widespread use because people didn't want to uh, pay royalties for that. And so they developed then other signature schemes, such as elliptic curve digital signature algorithm, which is a bit more convoluted, but Schnorr signatures were an example of this, where you somehow commit to something, get some randomness, and then create like this thing that allows you to check that I know the solution,
Hmm.
because otherwise I couldn't have generated the signature. Uh, but I am not giving you the secret key at any moment. Of course, if I do things wrong, and I somehow do. This is a problem that you have with this digital signature algorithm. If I repeat like the nonce, then you can recover by elementary math my secret key. That is something that happened, I think, with PlayStation 3 or 4. It was a very famous hack.
Huh.
Uh,
And
yeah.
so we go from this first example of ZK, the paper from Shafi Goldwasser and others, and then we had Shore signatures were kind of the next development after
No,
that, or
no, it was just an example. It came
okay.
a bit afterwards. But the thing is, it's hard to say what comes next, because there were like several things in parallel. So here you have, okay, the notion I can show you something without revealing you some secret. Okay, and there were like some examples. Another development, a very important one that you have, is you have this paper by, I think it was Babai, exploring like the consequences of having logarithmic verification. So what if I could check some computation in logarithmic time to the size of the computation? And it was very interesting because what this showed is, okay, we could have a very weak computer control what very powerful computers are doing and ensuring integrity. So in this case, it was not that zero knowledge mattered. It was more a matter of kind of scalability or of being able to control very powerful devices. Okay, so this was, I think, a very important paper because in the end, it's something that we are using in Ethereum. We are offloading computation to like powerful servers or rollups, and then they are going to send it to Ethereum for verification. And Ethereum is a decentralized computer, but not very powerful because you get the resilience by having lots of nodes and everybody checking everything, but that comes with a cost, which is okay, it becomes bottlenecked by the weakest devices. So this shows that it is possible for a weak device to control more powerful devices. And I think that was a very cool idea, and one of which we use today. Um, Another interesting thing that we got from the early 90s was also the Sumcheck protocol. So what they showed is that basically, suppose that you have a problem, which is I want to show that the sum of the evaluations of a polynomial over a set equals some number. Okay. Uh, we by leveraging interaction between a prover and a verifier, the verifier can check the correctness just by a logarithmic amount of operations and evaluating the polynomial at a single point. Okay, which shows that by leveraging interaction, we get a very short proof that allows us to see that the solution is correct without having to do all the work. Right now, the Sumcheck protocol is, I think, the main building block for modern proof systems. And if you come to think about it, it's been available for 33 years. So why did it take so long if we already had this very nice tool to have like modern proof systems? What was missing then?
Mm-hmm. A quick aside, our blog has an article explaining the Sumcheck protocol that you wrote, Diego. I just shared it in the comments here. It's not showing up, but I'll add it to the thread afterwards for anybody who's watching and would like to learn more about the Sumcheck protocol. But yes, Diego, yes, so we had this in the 90s. But
Yeah. So I think that first, of course, the theory wasn't like fully developed. On the other hand, these things look very nice in theory, but I think the world wasn't like there for these technologies yet. Because if you come to think about it, these are very good for our era where we do lots of things on the internet. We have blockchains, we have e-commerce, we do everything on the internet, and we have to deal with servers, and there is this problem of trust. In the 90s, not all the people had internet. Internet was not what we know it as today. And perhaps the thing of delegating something to some other entity was kind of weird. People, that is to say, computation and everything was not as massive as it is today. So, of course, perhaps some of the things that we were missing were like some use cases. And at the same time, computers were not as powerful as they are today. And so that kind of like limited what we could like build, because this adds a lot of overhead. So proving this implies that the prover has to do more work than just running the computation. But what it's doing then is saving a lot of work from the verifier. And that is something that is, of course, useful for blockchains. Then, of course, you have like very interesting like theorems that you get. For example, you get like the TCP theorem, okay, which shows that any problem in the NP class has a probabilistically checkable proof, okay, which means that basically you interact with somebody and you have a proof where you can check like a few strings at random or bits, and you can decide on that. In fact, Grot 16 is an example of a linear PCP. Then you also have like several important like theorems. You have like one by Shamir that shows that IP equals P space, for example. Then you get like several refinements of these theorems and everything. And you get perhaps more people that start working on this.
Diego, question. So a lot of these theorems and protocols that you're talking about, this is maybe obvious to some people, but maybe not to others, right? This is all and I'm just double checking my understanding is correct. This is all just cryptography research unrelated to blockchains up until recently. Like,
Yeah.
blockchains are a fairly new invention compared to a lot of the things that you are telling us about.
Yeah, in fact, they are not necessarily just cryptography. They can also be like, okay, problems in theoretical computer science that, okay, I want to see how efficiently I can solve like some problem. Maybe you don't care about whether it's cryptographically secure, only, okay, if I trust the prover is honest. Maybe I can solve this problem or check this solution by doing this. And you start having people, okay, applying all kinds of tools from different areas to trying to build these things. But as I was telling you, the problem is you didn't have like a big like use case. It was not that you had like governments that wanted to have their documents on chain and cared about privacy, because the internet was not the internet of the early 2000s or the internet as today. And besides, this adds a lot of like overhead. So you had a lot of developments in the theoretical side, but it was not that they got like a lot of funding as they got, I don't know, during the early 2010s or after that, when people started learning that, okay, this is an important tool for blockchains, and blockchains secure a huge amount of money. And we could build like DeFi on top of this. Okay, so let's start like adding money here.
So would you say
Then
that really like a lot of the advancements, say over the past 10 years in ZK, is directly because of how valuable blockchains and DeFi and crypto kind of became?
yeah, I think that what it added, that is to say, you got a lot of important theoretical results before this. But then you got more like engineering power, you got more researchers and more funding, and that allowed you to accelerate greatly. Because maybe when you are in academia, you care a lot about building an efficient protocol, maybe in asymptotic terms or something, but then you are not perhaps as good as coding as somebody who's in computer engineering and making things really fast. That is to say, you are a theoretician, you are like super smart, but that doesn't mean that you necessarily have all the time to be developing a very fast library or working with GPUs or other things. And perhaps or you could hire a team, but you don't get the money. So I think that, of course, having a lot of people in blockchain saying we are going to add this, having a lot of projects getting a lot of money to build Seagate L2s and everything, got a lot of traction, made a lot of people join that were not perhaps from cryptography, but were like very good engineers and could like understand the protocols and everything and build these technologies. So I think that it helped accelerate um, lots of things, but we had a lot of theoretical developments. On the other hand, the other problem that we had is that perhaps cryptographers were not so happy with some ideas behind proof systems. So the random oracle model was something that people were perhaps not that comfortable because it was not a common assumption, and it had not been tested that much or didn't have like the same kind of theoretical background. Um, and maybe you had like some theorems showing that in some cases it could be insecure. So it took like a lot of time also from the cryptographers to get used to some things, or at least saying this is kind of necessary evil. I want to build this. This is perhaps the fastest way to develop this. Okay, we'll see what happens. Perhaps we learn something else and we can build then other things that don't rely on these assumptions, or we become like comfortable. So I think that by adding a lot of people and making like several improvements and being able to bridge a lot of knowledge that was generated in academic papers and translating it maybe into simpler terms helped accelerate. So if you start looking a bit at the proof systems, you have the GKR protocol, which is, I think, from 2008. And it's widely used now, at least to prove like several statements, for example, in the case of lookup arguments. But again, we had GKR and it didn't like, okay, we have GKR, this is going to be really fast. It took still like some time. In 2008, also, we got Bitcoin. And then we have this moment where you have like pioneers getting into this world. I always remember Ellie's story about he became Bitcoin pilled and he realized, okay, we have something that may be interesting for them. And I think that started a different era, okay, where this technology could add something to blockchains. Um, but it was not, that is to say, you still got like a lot of constructions or maybe proposals to improve like the Sumcheck protocol. If I don't remember incorrectly, Justin Taylor has been working with the Sumcheck protocol for at least, I don't know, 14, 15 years in some way or another. Um, and so that is to say, you had people saying, okay, we have these things that are efficient, but how do we build something that we can like really prove? Um, and then I think that perhaps the biggest step there was with Pinocchio in 2013, 2014. Uh, it wasn't, the paper says almost practically verifiable computation. I need work using pairings, elliptic curve pairings. And this is something that originally pairings were used to kind of try to break discrete log in elliptic curves. And some people like Dan Bonnet started working on that. And they developed, I think, in the late 90s, beginning of the 2000s, the BLS signatures, which we are using today for Ethereum's consensus. And they realized, okay, pairings provide us this very cool property where we hide numbers in an elliptic curve group, and we have some way of showing that we can multiply those two numbers and they equal another one, but all hidden, okay? And that way we got a construction that was zk. Okay, so another problem that you have is, okay, you have a construction, but the thing is, you have this interesting result that if you have a snark for an MP complete problem, such as, for example, graph coloring, then what you can do is have a snark for any NP problem, because you can just compile your NP problem to an instance of the NP complete problem, and then you just generate the snark. So theoretically, it doesn't look like that hard, but the problem is you have to compile that. And that's like the difficult thing. And so people started thinking, okay, how can we transform things into something that we can prove? And of course, you have like Boolean circuits and show that you have a solution to a Boolean circuit, but that's not super efficient. And you started having like, okay, R1CS, which basically shows, okay, I know a solution to a system of quadratic equations. But the problem is you have to transform your computer program into that. And that is like not super straightforward. Okay, you have to do like some work to compile everything down to that. And you say, okay, maybe from a theoretical point of view, it's not that complicated. You just write a compiler. Yeah, but you have to write a compiler. Of course, then we got Circum that allowed us to write circuits in a less like cumbersome way. And I think that 2 years later, we got perhaps the efficient construction that we wanted or needed, which was Grot 16. The only problem was that these constructions required a trusted setup. And that is a problem because, well, you need to ensure that nobody knows the secrets that were used to generate these trusted setup. And the problem was also that in the case of Grot 16, you needed to generate a new setup for every program that you wanted to write. So that meant that, for example, if you got a bug in your circuit and then you needed to correct everything, the problem is you needed to regenerate everything from scratch.
So Diego, I know that you have to go very soon. So we're definitely gonna have to do a part 2 and continue all of this, because I feel like we just started getting into like the last 10 years, right? You mentioned Groth 2016 paper by Jens Groth, which is also a snark that a lot of people have heard of. It's used in a lot of things in crypto. But maybe a quick recap of like the core things you mentioned.
I can give you now that I got there a fast speed run to the rest. So then you started getting lots of different like constructions. You got Ligero. 2 years later, Eli proposed SNARKs. And in 2019, you get like lots and lots of different protocols. You have like Plonk, Sonic, Marlin, Aurora. You start getting, because people somehow understood everything. Besides, I think that in 2014, 15, you had a lot of formalization of some notions. They introduced the idea behind the polynomial interactive oracle proof. And then people discovered, okay, if I have a polynomial interactive proof, then using some kind of polynomial commitment scheme, what I can do is then compile it to a succinct argument And so people started saying, okay, what are these polynomial commitments? In 2010, the thing is you had a very interesting polynomial commitment scheme, which was Cate's KCG polynomial scheme. And you got like several proposals. In 2018, you got Fry. So people started saying, okay, I have like these building blocks. And the idea is I have to somehow transform my computation into a set of polynomial equations. Then what I am going to do is use some kind of polynomial interactive proof, oracle proof to show something. And then using a PCS, what I can do is compile. So theoretically, it got like very well explained. Of course, it's not the only construction, but most of them can be derived using these ideas. So people started saying, okay, what is the oracle proof that I have? How can I build a commitment? And then the good thing was that you got a lot of implementations by different engineering teams. You got different proposals and everything. But yeah, I thought 1 hour would be enough, but at least I think we covered like some of the basics. At some point, I can then build or explain more things.
Yeah. There's like, we went all the way from the very earliest constructions. You mentioned a lot of, I think, a lot of terms that people probably have heard or read here and there. Schnorr signatures. You talk about Sumcheck, GKR. We didn't even talk about random oracles and and interactive oracle proofs, which is probably like you touched on it, but didn't really have time to explain it. But I think, for someone like me who has been trying to learn a lot more about this over the past year, there is so much, and it is like there's so many different primitives and concepts. And the amazing thing is how they all fit together now to have things like zkVMs. And like, if you look at a zkVM, which we need to do that explainer video as well, because we have a great animation for you to narrate. There's everything you mentioned is sort of used in it in some way, and it lets us do very cool things nowadays. So,
Yeah. No, that is to say, it looks like there are like many things, but in reality, there aren't like that many. It's just that, well, in math, maybe you have like different ways of expressing something, but then when you boil it down, it's this thing, okay, I have what's called a PIOP, okay, where you have a prover, a verifier. The prover is going to send us messages like some polynomials, and the verifier is going to have like some possibility of like querying those polynomials, okay, to check everything. And the idea then is that using the polynomial commitment scheme, what I am doing is you basically giving you the access to the oracle, but you don't have to read the whole polynomial. You can say, okay, this is something that represents this polynomial. I cannot see inside it, but I can ask it for something. I can say, give me this polynomial evaluated at this point. And then you have like different constructions. You have a KCG. You could use Fry together with Merkle trees to instantiate a polynomial commitment scheme. And now you have where. You have like different strategies, but in the end, it's all variants of these, and how you decide to somehow encode the correctness of the computation. Of course, it took like some time and people thinking in theoretical terms how we abstract all these and create like the framework. But we can cover that in an upcoming like session or
yeah,
something, or
yeah.
write a bit more.
I have a ton of questions to ask you, and I think a lot of people would love to hear more. But Diego, for now, I'm going to let you go so you're not late for the class you need to teach. Thank you for taking time to teach us here today. I guess what I'll say is, instead of giving you something else that'll get you talking for a long time, is for people who want to learn more about zk and the basics of cryptography and are interested in this. I'd love to ask you how you'd recommend getting started, but maybe we have a nice call to action here, and we'll get people to follow your Twitter, and you can tweet some recommendations when you're not so pressed for time.
Okay, yeah, sure. No, we are going to share more, but this was kind of the core idea, and we can continue like talking about how you actually build these things. But well, this is what I told you was what's right now called the BCS compiler. Um, but one day we can take a little bit more time and try to digest this a bit more. But I think it was good that we could add a bit on history on our side, how we got there. And really, you had like several things we didn't cover, for example, the Cairo VM or SNARKs for C, which are these ideas that, okay, you can build a virtual machine and then prove that you run a program correctly on top of the virtual machine. That solves a lot the problem that I said that, okay, you have to compile your computer program to something that you can prove. And that is not straightforward because you would have to have something for every program that you want to write. But having this universal circuit where you have the VM and then you prove that you run the code correctly helps a lot. That was, I think, a very clever idea put forward by Starkware's team when they proposed the Cairo VM. Of course, then we got the RISC-V VMs and everything. But I remember a lot of people thinking at that time that circuits were going to win against VMs. And we've seen it. We now have real-time proving in Ethereum, and it's because we had zkVMs and not like circuits. And I think it's accelerated a lot because now we have an efficient way of doing this. Not only because the proof system got efficient, but because we have also better tooling. So yeah, thanks a lot, Boris, for having me. I had a huge time, and yeah, we can continue talking about VMs and everything that uh, we used a bit more time on covering maybe some of the basics
Yeah.
and the background from complexity theory.
Yeah, but I think that's an important primer, and definitely we'll do a part 2 sometime soon. Diego, I'll let you go. I'll say and leave a couple of closing notes just for the anybody who's watching after. But thank you again. This was a pleasure as always. Always looking forward to more chances to learn from you. This is always good. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks a lot, Boris. See you.
See you soon.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, and well, I'm still recording. I just wanted to leave a few notes, but Diego, if you need to get going, please feel free. Just yeah, for anybody watching this on YouTube afterwards, we do these most Wednesdays, a lot of Wednesdays, and if you have ideas for guests, please send them in. If you have questions for Diego, you can leave them in the comments. If you're watching this on Twitter or on YouTube or anywhere, let us know what you think. We try to produce these videos to be useful for you and to help educate people on ZK and what is possible with the technology that we're trying to provide infrastructure for at Aligned. So yeah, with that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.